It all started when my uncle first told me that he'd seen a Sasquatch. I didn't believe him, but something about the way he told the story just captured my imagination. I thought maybe he'd been mistaken in what he'd seen, but I know now that I shouldn't have doubted him. There is a vast forest just beyond my backyard that stretches all the way back to a cliff face. Within those woods, you can find abandoned mines, streams, and even old, run-down wooden cabins. This was the playground of my early youth and the inspiration for many camping ventures. One fall night, my Uncle Peter came over to visit. He, my dad, and I spent the night beneath the stars around a campfire in the backyard. My dad had cut some old pine wood and stacked the logs perfectly in a circle. The fire rose up to illuminate the backyard, and a monochrome cloud pierced the star-studded night sky. "You know what they use pine wood for, right, boy?" said Uncle Peter, sitting down at the campfire. I shook my head. "Coffins. A pine wood box. 6 feet down," he said with a snarky grin. He laughed as he threw another log into the fire. Uncle Peter was an odd fellow, but trustworthy and reliable. He'd come to my rescue many times, driving out to fix my vehicle in the freezing snow when it broke down on the side of the road, and always offering his country wisdom. A peculiar sound cut through the night. It sounded like a woman screaming. "What the heck was that?" I said in a panic, scanning the darkness. "Ah, that's just an old screech owl. Nothing to worry about. I've seen things and heard things out in the woods that would really scare you. Beetles the size of your fist, and wandering hungry coyotes that certainly weren't afraid of humans," said Uncle Peter. For some reason, this didn't calm my nerves. My uncle then looked at me with a dead serious expression on his face and said, "You want to know about the weirdest thing I've ever run into out there?" My dad and I knew that he was about to tell us anyway, so we both agreed. "Well, it was out in that national forest just north of here. I was out after dark collecting firewood, and I started hearing these odd knocking sounds, as if someone was hitting a stick up against a tree trunk. Then I heard an extremely loud noise that made the hair on the back on my neck stand up. I froze in place. It was an animal I had never heard before. The sound was a deep whooping call, like that of a very large ape. The next thing I knew, I saw 2 sets of orange, glowing eyes in the dark. I shined my flashlight on it, only to see an 8-foot-tall, upright standing creature, like a man but covered in thick, dark brown hair. It let out another one of those whooping cries, and I booked it out of there immediately. I never ran so fast in my life. Never seen anything like it, and I hope I never do again." My dad and I were completely silent as Uncle Peter told his story. Afterwards, we were visibly tense, and we didn't spend much longer at the campfire before heading back inside. My uncle only laughed at our fear. "See, not so worried about that screech owl now, huh?" I wasn't entirely convinced by my uncle's story. I wondered if he just made it up to scare us. I mean, that's what a campfire story is, right? I thought maybe he'd just seen an odd bear obscured in the dark and mistaken it for something more. Surely even avid outdoorsmen can be mistaken, I thought. It seemed more likely than the idea that there were ape creatures somehow living out there in the forests. I couldn't believe it. I had to know for myself. So, in the weeks that followed my uncle's visit, I got the bright idea to head out into the nearby national forest where he supposedly saw the creature. What a mistake that was. I set out on my adventure in my dad's old mud-covered pickup truck, with only a camera hanging from my neck to document whatever I saw. A canopy of trees stood above me in colorful autumn variety, and a bizarre feeling walked alongside me as I wandered along the path. It was evening time, and my surroundings were beginning to turn a blue tint. I walked through the forest with great uneasiness. 1,000 eyes were watching me. The fall wind drifted through the environment, and and across the leaf-quilted forest floor. Suddenly, a knocking sound. It was hollow, an unmistakable tap on the side of a far-off tree trunk. I took a step forward. Again, a distinct knock, wooden in tone. What followed was a loud, guttural, whooping sound, which sent shivers down my spine. It was just as my uncle described, and like he did, I ran right out of there. I bolted for the truck without even thinking to lift my camera. Though I didn't see what made the sounds, I knew at this point that there was something out there. Something not quite man, but not quite beast. I couldn't prove it, but at least I knew the truth for myself. All the way home as I drove, I had the unsettling feeling that I was being watched. My eyes gazed worriedly at the trees on either side of the road. I couldn't shake the feeling until I pulled into my driveway. I went to bed that night without even bothering to share with my dad what I'd heard. I didn't feel like telling anyone about my experience. Hours later, I awoke to a sound in the backyard. I grabbed my flashlight and walked out onto the back porch. To my utter horror, I saw a pair of bright, glowing orange eyes at the edge of the woods. I hovered my flashlight over the glowing eyes to reveal a large, hairy creature standing eerily still between the trees and looking right at me with an almost human expression. The ape creature looked just as bewildered as I did at seeing him. He studied me curiously from across the backyard, as if amazed by my existence. 4 other sets of colorful eyes in green, red, and yellow then suddenly blinked to life in the darkness. He was not alone. The group of Sasquatch simply stared at me for a moment before unleashing an ungodly sound. I quickly went inside and bolted the door shut. The eyes eventually faded, disappearing into the woods behind my house. I didn't get any sleep that night. I just sat up in bed, staring out the window and waiting for their return. Yesterday, I found a set of massive footprints in my backyard. They were bigger than any person could make. Large, barefoot impressions pressed deeply into the mud. There's no question in my mind, no debate, and no ambiguity. There are bizarre, ape-like creatures living in the woods. My uncle and I have seen them, and countless others have as well. I'm not saying I believe all the stories of Sasquatch, but there are those who have actually witnessed these creatures. Those folks know what I'm talking about. Keep in mind, if you haven't seen them, you just might one day. These are not just scary stories. These are not just campfire tales. They are out there. I've seen them. But worse yet, they've seen me. They've followed me through the forest, shadowed me from behind the trees, and have come back with me to my home to live. I know now what it's like to be an undiscovered animal spotted for the first time. I know what it's like to be studied from a distance. There's nothing I can do. They know where I am. I can't hide. They know I'm here now. As the first light of dawn filtered through the dense canopy of the forest, I led my 2 nephews, Jake and Tommy, down the winding trail that snaked through the ancient woods. The air was thick with anticipation, the scent of pine mingling with the unmistakable aroma of fear that hung heavy in the air. I had brought them here to show them something I had seen many years ago, something that had haunted my dreams ever since, a living, breathing Sasquatch. I had never spoken of it before, not even to my closest friends or family, but something compelled me to share the truth with Jake and Tommy, to warn them of the dangers that lurked in the shadows. As we walked, I recounted every detail of that fateful day, the way the creature had emerged from the depths of the forest, towering over me with its massive frame and piercing eyes. I described its immense size, its fur-covered body, and the sense of primal terror that had washed over me like a tidal wave. Tears welled in my eyes as I spoke, my voice trembling with the weight of the memories that threatened to consume me. I told Jake and Tommy how I had been paralyzed with fear, unable to comprehend what I was seeing, and how I had fled into the safety of the trees, the creature's haunting cries echoing in my ears. As we reached the spot where I had first encountered the Sasquatch, a chill ran down my spine, and I felt a sense of unease settle over me like a shroud. The woods seemed to close in around us, the trees whispering secrets that I could not decipher. Suddenly, Jake let out a gasp, his eyes widening in disbelief as he pointed to a shadowy figure lurking among the trees. My heart skipped a beat as I followed his gaze, and there, standing before us, was the creature that had haunted my nightmares for years. It was just as I remembered it, tall and imposing, its fur glistening in the soft light of dawn. Its eyes bore into mine with a fierce intensity, and for a moment, time seemed to stand still as we stood locked in a silent, primal standoff. But then, as quickly as it had appeared, the Sasquatch vanished into the depths of the forest, leaving behind nothing but a lingering sense of dread and uncertainty. Jake and Tommy stared at me in disbelief, their faces pale with shock and awe. As we made our way back to the safety of civilization, I couldn't shake the feeling that we had witnessed something truly extraordinary, something that defied rational explanation. And as I looked into the eyes of my nephews, I knew that they would carry the memory of that encounter with them for the rest of their lives, a testament to the mysteries that lie hidden in the heart of the wilderness. November 30th, 2000, marked the beginning of a series of events that would forever change my perception of the world around me. My son, a bright-eyed and adventurous 10-year-old named James, was sent off to spend some time with friends and relatives at a nature preserve, an opportunity for him to explore the wilderness and indulge in his active imagination. Days turned into weeks, and as the days passed by without word from James, a sense of unease settled over me like a heavy fog. It wasn't until December 15th that they finally returned, James bursting with excitement as he regaled me with tales of his adventures in the wild. But as I looked into the eyes of my family members, I noticed something amiss, a flicker of fear hidden behind their forced smiles. Ignoring the gnawing feeling of dread in the pit of my stomach, I brushed aside their concerns and focused on the joy of having my son back safe and sound. Years passed, and James grew into a fine young man, preparing to embark on his journey into adulthood as he set off for college. As we sifted through his belongings, preparing to move him into his dorm room, I stumbled upon a collection of drawings tucked away in the depths of his closet. Curiosity piqued, I flipped through the sketches, each one a snapshot of James's childhood adventures. But as I reached the final drawing, a chill ran down my spine, and I felt the color drain from my face. In the distance, behind a gnarled tree, stood a tall, shadowy figure, a figure that sent shivers down my spine and stirred memories long buried in the recesses of my mind. In the next sketch, my family members stood in a circle, their faces contorted in fear as they fired aimlessly into the darkness, their bullets lost against the backdrop of the towering trees. It was then that the pieces of the puzzle fell into place, and the truth dawned on me like a bolt from the blue. James had witnessed something that fateful day in the wilderness, something beyond the realm of comprehension. An encounter with a creature that defied explanation, a creature known only in whispers and legends. As I gazed at the drawings before me, a sense of dread washed over me, mingling with a profound sadness for the innocence lost and the horrors witnessed by my son. And as I tucked the sketches away, a silent vow formed in the depths of my soul. To protect James from the truth, to shield him from the darkness that lurked just beyond the edges of our reality for as long as I lived.